guys. It's my first time here, so I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it. So, like every single person in this room, I have some superpower. And one of the most visible ones is that I can draw, right? So this is kind of a character that I like to draw, and I really relate to this character. And a friend of mine actually said, the older I'm getting, the younger this guy is becoming. But anyways, let's introduce him, okay? So this is Jim. He wants to get things done, grow. Be part of a high-performance team. He dreams of changing the world, but it's just a dream. His company went through many reorganizations, only to stay the same. This is the organizational chart. I think a few of you would relate to this. I call this the blame flow. It starts at the very top with God, or Godzilla. It goes to rule makers, and then controllers, enforcers. Who's left? The losers. My point here, though, is that all these people are victims. Okay? They're victims of a system they cannot defeat. It's a war of worlds, a world of cultures, where the few who exercise command and control systematically crush people's hearts and minds. But can you blame them? This is what we learn at school. There's a lot of business schools that actually teach us how to be a leader, right? You have to tell people what to do. I don't know if you have that here, but in Ireland, where I live now, in the UK and the US, there is this program on television, The Apprentice. And obviously for dramatization points of view, what you have is essentially a strong command and control leader, let's call it in that way, and in order to become the apprentice, I have to win. For me to win, everybody else needs to lose. You know what I mean? So we go into this kind of circle of going up the ladder, pretty much. But in order to do that, we have this kind of scarcity mentality, really. There aren't enough resources in the world, okay? And so I need to take as much as I can. So in 2001, I discovered the true nature of the problem. Like all along, we had focused on speed through efficiency, and efficiency through specialization, okay? So the idea there is that to write proper software, we need to specialize, and we put everybody with their own role in a particular position. It's really like this picture here, where people are rowing. Everybody sits in the same place, sort of. You have the guy at the back who's actually giving direction. And these guys are specializing. They're building muscles. Yeah? They're going up and down and building strength. And you know what? When everybody's synchronized, it must be beautiful. But it's probably like Zoolander, if you remember. You know, I can't remember if he couldn't turn left or right. You know, it seems to me that these guys probably are sitting in the same place and can only paddle on one side or the other side. But there is another thing about this picture. It's very clear that they go from A to B, and the water is flat. What happens if we find ourselves in this kind of world, whitewater rafting? Do we still need the same speed, the same strength? No, it's about adapting to change, right? So we need a different kind of skill set. Somebody said it's funny that you use Agile, use a waterfall essentially there as a metaphor for Agile, but that's the way it works. So Agile actually enables unprecedented collaboration among people. And rather than focusing, as many companies do today, on external, extrinsic motivators like bonuses and money, or, you know, kind of things that actually have a very limited amount of strength, I guess, in knowledge work, we began to focus on intrinsic motivators. What are they? Autonomy, mastery, purpose, right? We want to do something that matters. We don't want to be told step by step what to do. We're adults. We're working on knowledge. We're building knowledge. And we want to develop our craft. Yeah? We want to be enabled to do that. But this is what happens on a typical Agile enterprise, which is pretty much like what we have is, we have the development teams. Who's supporting the development teams? These are kind of the cogs, yeah? Who's supporting them? Scrum Masters, team leads, they're kind of putting oil in the cogs. And then everything else stays the same. Right? We actually don't have good stories in Agile, typically. Right? Manager is part of the problem, stay out of the way. We stay in the room, we have a purpose, we'll work together, you're a manager, out. You know, of course then what happens is that we have these kind of issues with Agile and integrating them in larger organizations, right? My friends, organizations can't be Agile if only the development teams are Agile. Okay. So besides, and this is another point I think has been touched upon a few times, you know, Agile is not about following ceremonies, branded or not. You know, like there is that problem of actually, you know, what ceremony should we follow? You know, how many stand-up meetings do we do? Are we Agile because of that? Of course not. Of course not. So let's talk about Lean. I very often use Lean to integrate the Agile story, if you want, within organizations. So, a lot of you are familiar with this, but there is Taiki Ono, who is the founder of the Toyota production system, who famously said, all we're doing is looking at the timeline from order to cash, and we're reducing that timeline, not by working twice as fast or over time and all that kind of stuff, but just by being smart and identifying waste and removing that. Okay? And so of course, like we all started, okay, Lean is about waste removal, and it's about, you know, all the time we have different perceptions of what Lean is. So I'll give you my perception. This is just part of the story. This is only part of the story. If this is the value stream, Mary Poppindick on Lean Software Development rebranded it as concept to cash. Who's making money? The development teams. Right, so I put them on top. They're still the cogs in these assembly lines. Who is supporting them? As before, the Scrum Masters, the team leads. But you see, the problem is that each of these teams, they can only see a part of the entire value stream. This is what often happens, okay? They can act, but within that kind of area. Who's supporting them? It has to be management. It has to be. Okay? So in Lean, managers are servant leaders. Of course, you go to a manager and say you should be a servant leader, that's really not enough. But this is what it is. With guidance and methods, because giving a purpose without method, as Deming said, makes no sense, they become problem solvers, critical thinkers, mentors. Okay? If you actually look in the Lean literature, you may come across with a methodology for problem solving called A3 thinking, for example, which is a structured approach to problem solving. Okay? But A3 thinking is not about problem solving, it's about developing problem solvers. Okay? So it's called A3 because you use a report, and step by step you begin developing the story of a problem in that way. I write one step, then I go around and say, this is my understanding so far. Do you agree? So you use influence, okay, to essentially to gather consensus, to gain consensus and refine the understanding of the problem. But the whole point is, it is about developing problem solvers. So as a consequence, this is what I learned. It's not what you do, but rather what you learn that matters. Okay? It's not about solving a problem, it's actually how we go about it and what we learned out of doing that work that really matters. So, as a consequence, this is what I started actually thinking about, and I created this concept that if value streams are important, maybe there should be another concept, in addition to how we make money, I guess, is or create value for the customer probably, which is the concept of learning stream. Okay, to have one or more learning streams, essentially orthogonal or in parallel to value streams. So it's not important just the outcome, but really understanding how we get to that outcome. And here's a theory an hypothesis that I had, and I guess it's a working theory right now, and it's the following. Who is the hero in firefighting companies? The firefighters. Why? Because the firefighters actually, when they solve problems, they patch problems around, they save the day, they're the heroes, okay? Everybody else who actually works in prevention, cleaning stuff, avoiding things to happen in the future, they're totally under the radar. A lot of the stuff that you do, guys, are totally undetected. So typically in these organizations, the firefighters are the heroes. But here's the thing, as you start actually bringing to the surface how we learn, here's what happens. Companies evolve and reward the real heroes. Okay? Because suddenly now they have a way to actually visibly see how these things work. Okay, so arguably an A3 report, as I explained before, is a learning stream around the problem. But the thing is, like, it's like being an investigator, okay? You put your hat down, and essentially the idea in Toyota, for example, is you go slow to go fast. It's not about filling a report as fast as you can, it's about really doing deep investigation and fact-finding and finding the gap between an expectation or standard and the current situation, and essentially framing the problem at the beginning. Then you set a little step towards improving towards the problem, you do analysis, countermeasures, and you go on. It's slow, okay? It is slow, and for certain problems, that's absolutely the way to go for, okay? For a particular set of complicated problems, I guess. And so I started actually thinking about how can we accelerate the rate of our learning? So the next thing I want to talk about, I'm particularly proud of, something that I'm developing, I guess, which is called popcornflow. It is about continuous evolution. So first of all, do you remember, for the ones who are still around, the days before continuous integration went to became mainstream? Yeah? I was an architect. I used to use like rational unified process, you know, like these big processes and whatever. And it was very very customary to, we write code, essentially I start from all the stages, but we wrote a lot of code, maybe for 6 months, you know, sometimes, or a year. I have projects, I know, where, you know, projects that lasted 5 years. And then integration came, you know. Before integration, project manager, all happy. We're all progressing according to plan. Then we put all the pieces together, you know, everybody creating bugs, features in isolation. Then when you start putting them together, you know, the time essentially extends, you know, sometimes extends for weeks, months, and I heard of years as well, right, where people are unable to release. Okay? Just because the integration was at the very end. So somebody who was smart enough said, well, how about we try to integrate a little bit more often? That sounds like a good idea, right? So we started actually integrating once a month, and then it became once a week, yeah, the weekly builds. Then we heard things about nightly builds, and now we do continuous builds, right? Continuous integration and even continuous deployment. So it seems the natural thing to do. Why do we treat change differently? So every time, that was the bloodbath, by the way. Okay, if you see 28 days later or something. Today, most of us think about change as big and scary. And I started actually thinking, but what if we could evolve the way we work as fast as some of the most adaptive organisms on Earth? Really, really fast. I actually learned about some bacteria that actually, they have a new generation every 15 minutes. That's pretty something, right? They have lots of generations, they evolve, and then essentially whatever drug you invented becomes useless. Because they really learn to adapt through mutations, of course, but they really learn to adapt. And I started actually thinking in that direction. So here's my thought. Popcorn flow rule number 1. If change is hard, make it continuous. Small and continuous. So to explain this, and actually there is the knob there, because what I have in mind is actually the old days of Kent Beck having that metaphor on extreme programming, and actually say, if I pull the knobs and I move them to 10, what happens? What would happen? right? And so for some companies, this is actually a strong statement. If it's hard, do it all the time. Let's define agility as our ability to evolve. Then if the more we evolve, the more agile we are. So a while ago, I worked with a team who had not deployed in months, and with the motto, which comes from Toyota actually, hard on systems and soft on people, we worked together and evolved using the Kanban method. Doesn't matter, it could have been Scrum, really. But the Kanban board trigger insights and capture our flow of work, okay? Our value stream. Remember the thing at the top? And what I realized is that's the outcome of our thinking. So we think, we make changes, and then the board reflects that. Okay? The real secret for us was how we defined essentially small, traceable change experiments. A powerful learning stream that I call popcornflow, and the name popcorn comes from these words. Problems and observations, options, possible experiments, committed, ongoing, review, and next. Okay? It's kind of a PDCA cycle as well. Popcorn. And, sorry, some people are taking a picture. Wait for a second. Okay. So we captured actually this. We created essentially a board, a parallel board, an additional board in this case, but in some cases they're parallel. And effectively we have columns for each of those steps. And it starts with problems and observations. What are problems? Well, a problem could be that we have 3 bugs a week. Okay, it's factual, undebatable. Or it could simply be as the code sucks, right? And I'll write it down. But what I'll do is, I'll write it down by putting my icon there, okay? And the reason is, I want to instill Kaizen urgency. Essentially the idea that Kaizen is continuous improvement, and we need to move, okay? Our enemy is inertia. Let's move. If we see problems, I'll write down what I see. So what I do though, is I'm happy to make progress even with imperfect information. So differently from A3 thinking, where it's all fact-finding, I'm writing down my opinion. But you know what? Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but the shared opinion is a fact. That is essentially, I write down my ticket, I have my name there, but then I discuss with the team. Do you guys agree? Is that a problem? If they say yes, I'll take my icon out, and now it's a fact. Okay? Then the next thing is, what options do we have? I elicit options, right? I ask first. Based on this problem, what options do we have? I use Satir model, which is essentially says, if you only have one option, you have no options. If you have 2, you have a dilemma. If you have 3, you have a world of possibilities. Okay? So I try literally 3 or more options, but generally trying to segment around 3. Okay, so we're really thinking about option thinking there. So very often, instead, what do? We see a problem. Okay, what can we do? So we have a problem and a solution. Okay, problem and solution all the time. Instead, there's a problem. What options do we have? And it's visible. Now, problems in options lead to a backlog of possible experiments. So let's do the example of the code sucks. What options do we have? Unit testing, test-driven development, pair programming. Have you ever tried introducing pair programming in your teams? It tends to be difficult, right? From now on, we shall do pair programming until death will separate us. Yeah? It's a bit hard. You can expect this is a territory of extreme uncertainty, okay? It's not about resistance to change, it's about reaction to change. I can propose the same change to different people, and they react in different ways. What I'm doing here is applying Lean Startup for organizational change. Okay? So the idea there is to say, how about we try it? We do a little experiment. Me and you, let's do pair programming for 3 days. Okay? Only for 3 days. But it's a real experiment. So let's write an expectation at the end of the 3 days. Let's write down that I like it, you like it, our perception of the code is better, and we want to continue doing it in the future. How about that? It's only 3 days. What do you have to lose? okay? But we write it down. So in this particular case, in this example, is a typical team, maybe a Scrum team or a Kanban team, it doesn't matter. You have the developer who is writing the code, yes. Somebody else needs to pick it up for reviews, for testing, whatever the point is. And typically what you would see, particularly in the early days, is that teams end up at the end of the sprint and there's a lot of stuff that is accumulated, okay? So we already know some valuable options, I guess, in that direction. In this case was to limit work in progress, to limit WIP. So how do we write it? So that's the action, you see. Let's add explicit WIP limits to the board. Then you have the reason, which is a link to the problem that we had before. So all the time there is a reason of why we're doing these experiments. Which could be as simple as we want to make progress, okay? But there's logic. Then we have an expectation, so the work will be smoother, the reviews will happen sooner. So instead of spending essentially a lot of time on doing sprint planning, they're doing it more just in time. Okay, so at each retrospective, though, there's a kata, okay? There's a sequence, and it's always the same, and essentially is: what experiments did we agree to do? Which ones did we actually do? What was their expectation? What's reality? What did we learn? Then we move it to the next column, is based on what we learned. What are we going to do next? I know it by heart. Everybody knows it by heart at this point, because it's a sequence that we do over and over. Imagine every retrospective pretty much to go through this kind of review. So what you have effectively is that you commit to a small set of experiments week after week. And all these experiments have some expectation. I actually call it committed because what I say is, how about we try this for 3 days? What do you have to lose? But rather than nodding and say, yes, let's do it, and then you don't, and boycott it along the way, as sometimes it happens, I actually say, you know what, I would rather we didn't do it. But if we do, let's commit to try to do it as much as we can. Let's make it work effectively, okay? That level of commitment. But then again, it's a light commitment. Otherwise, the kata wouldn't say, okay, which ones we said we were doing, right? And then which ones did we actually do? So some people fear failure, and they see the gap between the expectation and reality as frustration. But I think actually the only failure is when we don't set an expectation in advance. We say, well, let's try, let's see what happens, If we begin to set an expectation before, then the gap between the two is called learning. I actually get really annoyed if all the time we run experiments and we pass them all, because yes, we are improving, but effectively we are improving, but perhaps not pushing ourselves, as much as we can. Or, we do things that we know already will work. I really actually like sometimes when we don't meet all our expectations, because the gap between the two forces us to think, okay, it didn't happen what we expect. What can we learn about that? Okay? So inertia is our enemy. That's what I believe. So any change is good change, really. If you think about indicators, I don't want to say maybe metrics is a strong word, right, for agility. But if I define agility as our ability to change, then you can actually count these experiments and look at the throughput. And that pretty much is a learning stream, and what I have is a learning throughput. It's the number of experiments we do per week. In cycle time, we try to make the experiments as small as possible. You see where this idea of continuous evolution is building up? But it's building up in a very visible way. Okay, it's not fail fast, fail often, it's actually learn fast, learn often. Right from the beginning, I knew that this thing had something different, because that team started actually running 5 to 10 experiments a week and moved from no deployment at all in months to deploying multiple times a day by using this kind of system here. And experiments were things like this one. So it started in a way with a little experiment, so fix as you go. I'm talking about hundreds of experiments. I actually looked at their board and extracted and make it a little bit adapted for this, but really these are real experiments. It started with fix as we go. You know what? If we see a problem, let's modify it and change it and publish. Okay? Now, it was a group of developers who were new, coming into the development team, who were, and these other guys were much more conservative. So obviously, this experiment has been negotiated, okay? Because it's not that everybody's got the same attitude to say, you know, if I see a problem, fix it. Some people come to the idea, if it's not broken, leave it there. All the time, right? So there's been negotiation there. But with this kind of little thing of actually saying, well, let's try it for a little bit, what you have to lose, we actually moved and started actually doing this. And this actually led to a cycle of becoming more and more aggressive, if you want. So one of the next ones was pair on just-in-time analysis. So again, we're moving towards just-in-time analysis to reduce sprint planning. Again, it started from that problem, generated options. So what they wanted to do pretty much is to pair up so they could do a quick just-in-time analysis, okay? And that reduced pretty much, again, sprint planning and all that kind of stuff. So we're moving towards a continuous flow. Then another experiment was, do analytics meet up? You know, so as simple as a little meeting, just to show how it works on this new tool that we are adopting right now. How do we show analytics? So that instead of having a knee-jerk reaction to the product owner asking for predictability, we actually have a mature conversation on how we can achieve predictability without strong estimation. So this is more in the no estimate kind of idea, okay? But we couldn't start, obviously, with an experiment like this one. It kind of evolved. You can see the path, the journey. So between these experiments, there's probably, I don't know, 30 experiments in between, okay? So this is continuous. And then it spreads. See, it went from that team to other teams. The CEO started asking, you know, how are these teams going? And I would just point at the board. Look at all the experiments these guys are doing. You can actually see the level of agility. You see there's one team who is maybe perceived as being faster, and in some point in time they may actually be faster. But these guys are evolving. You can say, you know, they're going to catch up and go after because they learn how to learn. Okay? And then the CEO says, well, you know, now I'm jealous because the technical teams are doing this work. I need your help in sales. There's nothing. This is about problem solving or rapid problem solving or option generation, a little experiment. So it moves into sales, where the problems are more about how we satisfy. Maybe it was much closer to the customer side, if you want. And then marketing. So I would like you to stop and think in terms of, imagine this continuous flow of experiments to accelerate the rate of change in your organization, in every corner of your organization. How fast would you go? So today, popcornflow is entering in more organizations. This is actually new. It's a new thing. I've been working on this for the last 2 years, I guess. But now finally there is a name, so some people are picking it up. So it's entering more organization. This is a physical board. You can see the two streams, right? At the top, there is a Kanban board, and at the bottom, there's a popcornflow board. Right? So the experiments are down there. It is helping families. This is my son, 5 years old. We actually have this board at kids level in the sitting room. And we started with problems like the toys are on the floor. What options do we have? And now he wants to play the game. You know, let's play the problem game. And I said, yeah, but Matteo, we need to, you know, I can't see problems. I don't know what to put there. I have a problem. I can't catch a ball, right? Okay, what options do we have? Option number 1, practice, practice, practice. Okay, let's write something down, okay? Option number 2, maybe how we practice. We catch the ball holding the hands of the lower part. Option number 3, we use a box. Okay, so, and then we said, okay, what experiment, and he loved that option of using a box to catch the ball, right? We opened the surface. So I said, well, let's do a real experiment. We don't use any box, we use that box over there. And I'll throw 10 times. How many times do you think you will catch it? 10, okay? Write it down. And we did the experiment. Of course, it didn't succeed. And then we tried again, and he said, again, let's try this experiment again. Okay, what's your expectation? 10. So we didn't change the conditions, and again, it didn't work. So we started changing the conditions anyways at some point, and then we converged, okay? But this is about helping our kids to think clearly, okay, in some way, to help them in the reasoning. And then, of course, I brought a story like that in a comic to the vice principal of his school. So this is what's happening in the near future, is entering schools. From the activist point of view, I find it awesome. From the entrepreneurship point of view, I find it awesome. Maybe this is the Facebook strategy, right? I enter schools first, and then I conquer the corporates. There's projects under active development. I actually have a low-fidelity minimum valuable product actually today here with me, like decks to have like, how can I say, casual conversations one-on-one. I was, Gil is not here today, but I was at dinner once with a lawyer in Israel, and I was saying, I have a problem with these managers, and I have the solution. And I said, you talk exactly like my son. What options do you have? You know what I mean? So you start actually putting things on the table, literally, to evaluate this kind of approach. There's a book in the making. A brand new discussion forum is actually an experiment, which is going to fail, I think, next week, something like that, for what is going. But you're free to join, and if you join the conversation, maybe the experiment won't fail. I tend to be very brutal with my experiments, and effectively, if there isn't enough conversation going on with a few people that I did invite, I'll just kill it and move on. Okay? So please help me save the children and save this forum. Okay, and there's also a secret. I guess it's not a secret anymore, but I'm working on a platform pretty much for actually enabling this and making it more focused. So the question then is, okay, so we're evolving, okay? So I'm working with teams who are evolving very rapidly, and that's fantastic. But then the question is, are we evolving somewhat in the right direction? Now, there is one point to say. When I say any change is good change, and I mean it, is that I'm actually calculating throughput, learning throughput, all these experiments, but from the point of view of indication of agility, I don't care if those experiments pass or fail. It's like mutation, okay? Some change goes in the right direction, some other change wouldn't. But the thing is, we need to change, and normally we don't. So the cumulative effect of all this change leads to perfection, leads to improvement. So improvement without change is impossible. That's really the point. But is any change improvement? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Okay? Now, obviously, we use our experience and knowledge to evolve in the right direction. But unfortunately, what happens in our world is that the focus of the problems that we tackle tend to be very internal. Very operational excellence, I guess. And I wonder, are we really creating customer value? So let's talk about this one. Breakthrough innovation using a theory called jobs to be done. So let's go back to this question really. How do you create customer value? How? So if we talk about the lean circles, you need to listen to the voice of the customer. Right. Or we create value through the development of people. I often say that. I actually made that up as a way of actually saying there's different ways, for example, to make money. I'm not saying that money is just maybe a metric, I guess, but we want to create value for the customer, okay, which in some ways often translates into money. So there's different ways to make money, but through the development of people, I believe, is lean, okay? Attends to folks' needs, and then I asked, well, Marshall, yeah, but what does that mean? How do you attend to folks' needs? And he would say, well, it says it, by attending to folks' needs. Okay, so you see, like, these are principles that work in principle, but, are they actually usable in practice in a way or the other? So if we go further, we have, like, get out of the building, from the lean startup. The data is not here, it's outside. Okay, I'm out of the building, now what? You have growth hacking. If you're a hipster, or just like, just do it. Okay, so everybody's got opinions and principles on how to tackle that. But here's what happens in reality. How many product owners / managers do we have here? Okay, shame on you. Shame on you. This is what happens. It's not really shame on you. It's more like we're humans, right? So we have an idea, and we are humans, and 9 out of 10 is a crap idea. Okay, who's a developer here? Developers? Okay, we have some developers. But you know, shame on you as well, because you actually implement it in the first place. Then of course we have people following that, right? We have people who improve it over time, you know, team members and whatever. We have testing, and then we serve it to the customer. Then somebody like me, right, comes there, like the lean expert, lean and agile expert, and says, we need to apply value stream mapping here, right? And this is what happens, right? So we improve that, and all we're serving is shit. Okay, but then somebody says, but you know, Claudio, in Lean, we have a lot more than just speed, right? There's more than that, yeah? You know, you want to go fast? That's the way. And I say, yes, absolutely. In addition to speed, what do we have? We make it cheaper, yeah? Or better quality, yeah? This is organic, so it should be better. Or, you know, we are innovative, but this innovation is a bit kind of incremental, like in a way. So, you know, it's in a stick, but it's still shit in a stick. That's really what it is, okay? So, but these assumptions are actually, in a way, they're all based on the idea that the competition is working out of the same metrics. So, generally speaking, if we are faster than the competition, we win. If we provide better quality, we may win. These are the metrics and dimensions that we are using and how we compare to our competition. So, it makes somewhat sense until there's a different kind of competition, and the customer gives money to that. Okay? My friends, no matter how hard we try, we're still open to disruption. I burned $15 million. I was a chief technology officer for a company. We were the new company of the year in 2005, and in a very lean and agile way, we went out of business, as I say. The point being is, operational excellence is just not enough. So then we have the traditional approaches, yeah? We use things like personas, yeah? Interviews. Personas are like, you know, when, there is this prototype name, like his name is, I don't know, Jim, he's got 3 dogs, he does this, does that, and we create that kind of, we have a fake picture. We try to get an understanding, okay? So we do interviews, market segmentation, product segmentation, we have opinions, we use data, we position ourselves with the competition and so on. There's a lot of Me Too strategy effectively going on there, okay? And we have this fundamental assumption that customers don't know what they want. Well, you know what? They know what they want. They know what they want to accomplish, but they express it with the ideas that they can see today. Ideas and products that they can see today. So the question is really, what causes them to buy? See, a lot of the other work that we do creates correlation, but it's not causation. It's not exactly what causes people to go, say, to a particular event or buy a particular product. What is actually causing them? It's not because I have 3 dogs. It's not because, you know, I do whatever. So Clayton Christensen actually has got this theory effectively, which is people encounter situations that drive the need to accomplish a job, and they hire and fire product and services to get the job done. Okay? So the job, not the customer, is the fundamental unit of analysis. It's not that we buy a new phone, we fire another device and we buy the phone. Okay? So we constantly fire and hire. Fire and hire. I don't buy a new iPhone 6, I fired my previous phone, whatever that was it, and then I bought an iPhone 6, for example. But so think in terms of hiring and firing products and services. Why? Because we have these situations, we have a job to do, and this product allows us to make progress. And there are, every time we purchase something, in a way or the other, it could be in 5 minutes, it could be like in years, but there are 4 forces essentially applying upon us when we make a purchase. So we have the push of the situation, like in this case, this guy is off the cliff and is being literally pushed, right, off the cliff. If the product comes there at that point to save his life, he's going to buy it, okay? There's a strong push there. The situation may be your wedding in a month's time, okay? If you have a wedding in a month's time, you're looking to hire products and services to enable you to have the wedding day, you know, the perfect wedding day or whatever. But the push by itself very often is not enough. okay? What we are looking at is you have to have something to buy in the first place. Otherwise, it's like global warming. We know it's a problem, there's a push, but we don't know what to do about it, really. Okay, so there is the attraction, the pull of the product. Like in this case, the product is actually that rope, okay? It's coming down, you know? And if the guy finds himself in that situation, he's going to buy that. Okay? So these two forces move us and make us buy something. But then, of course, it's not that we buy everything all the time, right? So there must be something on the other side. And on the other side, what we have is the anxiety of the new choice. So if I purchase this rope, what's going to happen? Will it hold my weight? Will I look like a monkey? What will my friends think about it? You know, like those things like that. There's actually functional, but also social aspects that you need to take in consideration, personal social aspects. And together then with the anxiety that holds us back is also the habit of the present. So say you're an economic buyer in a big company and you have problems, but you are never going to, because it's what you believe as a habit, you will never hire a consultant. For whoever is a consultant here, bad news, they're not going to hire you 9 out of 10. Okay, because they don't believe in external consultants who can actually help, or anything. Essentially, the idea here is that if we solve already the problem and it's not too bad, then in the current way we do things, then we're not essentially going to make progress by purchasing a new product. Anyways, these forces here work across time, so they evolve along a timeline effectively. So it starts from the very beginning where you have a first thought and they say, I have a problem, here's the situation appears, I have a problem. There got to be something out there. But at the beginning, there's the passive looking, you know, like we see solutions, but we're not really spending any energy on that one. Then perhaps some event happens, something gets completely screwed and whatever. So at that point, when that event happens, then we're looking actively for some solution. Then again, there is typically another event which is more connected to time. So it's either your wedding as we approaching it, okay? So as you approach pretty much that deadline, you're ready to make some how can I say, essentially to work out those forces, like they have less, the anxiety maybe because it gets up, then the anxiety about buying a particular solution goes down, in the sense of actually saying, I have to make a decision, right? So you negotiate everything in your head. Then at some point you need to decide, buy, consume, then you finish or experience the products, and then in the end you're satisfied. See, the sad thing about companies and product development is that when we ever go back to the customer, typically we ask the last part, you know, how was the experience with this product? We use Net Promoter Score. Would you recommend it? And what we're losing is all the energy that comes before that, the decisions that actually came to actually lead to actually buy that product. Whatever product you guys are developing, why are customers buying your product and not somebody else's? Do you know? Yeah, what were the decision points? So Bob Moesta says, we only talk to people who have bought because embedded in the choice set is the value code of what they're willing to switch from and to. So it's during the switch, when I'm switching from something to something else, that I'm making some decisions. You really want to extract what those points were. Why? Because if I build something new, I want to really understand what are the key aspects that actually led to the decision to buy maybe a competitor. Right? What was that? Are we developing that area? Should we develop that area? Is that well served by the market? So how do we capture it? We do interviews. And so I learned to use the metaphor of being essentially a director on a movie, and the movie is a documentary on your purchase. And I start from the facts, so I know in this particular day, you know, you've been buying this product here. And then you reconstruct, like the scene, and you say, you know, it seems a bit weird, but help me reconstruct the scene. How were you dressed? Where were you? I actually created some product, and I called back actually some people, and I found out they were in their pajama at 3 o'clock at night time in an hotel, and I would ask things like, was the television on, television off, music on, music off, what kind of music? And then they started actually saying, okay, I see you had this on Amazon. and they tell you, things. Yeah, it was in my wish list. Well, how long has it been there? What other products were there? You start positioning how it was like in their mind, how they position in their minds the idea. Because we know people, we build the products with our theories on how people will use it, and then. But then we don't know the jobs that actually people have, and they end up hiring our products for. Okay, and so by reconstructing all this kind of information, you have clarity on the mindset of what the customer actually is looking for. And anyways, I have a set of cards I'm building as well for improving these interviews. Anyways, can we go even further? Yes, we can. So not only you want the jobs, you also want to understand what metrics they use to define a successful execution of a job. This is Anthony Ulrich, strategy from outcome-driven innovation, effectively. So it's literally, imagine having a map of jobs and outcomes, all these metrics. And so I adapted, it's a concept that is not new, I just adapted a little bit, but this is the classic user story that most of us are familiar with, okay? As a mobile user, I want a longer antenna so that I can have a better reception, right? And I work with teams, like a mature agile team will actually look at the SODAT and say, look at that part, because maybe there are cheaper ways to actually achieve that need, if you know what I mean, right? Could be cheaper than the longer antenna. Again, the user, and in that case could be the product manager, product owner, expresses a requirement based on the solutions that they can see today. It's not a need, it's a requirement. We're in the problem space, we're in the solution space on the requirement, okay? So, but if we look at this one, there are early assumptions, as I said. Now, a mature team can actually extract this information and actually say maybe there are better ways. Most teams that I see don't do that. How about a situation like this one instead? When, that's the context. Okay, so when I'm calling a friend, this is the way I change it. When I'm calling a friend, I want to minimize the likelihood that the conversation drops. Okay? That's a big change. There's no assumption built in there. It's just an expression of a need. Notice another thing. The longer antenna is like we create bananas, right? We're not writing software, we're creating bananas. They perish over time. That's what I keep all the time saying. Work in progress on a board. We need to move this stuff because it perishes, right? But actually it perishes even as a feature, like if you look at this. So this is much more permanent. The job story is more permanent. Like in a much longer time, that will still be valid. And the longer antennas we see, like is antennas these days, they're embedded on. You would express it completely different. Okay, so they vary. And here's the key thing. There's some people in the community who are saying, oh, let's replace job stories with user stories. Nonsense. Job story is an expression of a need, a customer need. And imagine that for each job, I'm extracting 50 to 150 of these job stories, okay? And it's a backlog. So this is what happens then. Once I have the job stories, which is in the problem space, you can easily get to user stories, which are in the solution space. What do I apply here? Essentially, it's popcornflow. Yeah? Because really what we have here, or option thinking, whichever way you want to look at it, the job stories, now we have a catalog of job stories. How do we prioritize them? That's what I would like a product owner to work on. What do we prioritize them on? We prioritize them by the order of, it is important to get the job done, and it's poorly served by the market. Because I'm not going to build a super complicated application anymore. I'm just looking for applications that actually help us fulfill the job, but they're totally poorly served by the competition. That's how you disrupt anybody. Almost anybody. Or at least the way you may consider having a high potential for highly likelihood for disruption. It's important to get the job done, poorly served by the market. But the thing is now, the product owner goes there, proposes a story to the team. What options do we have? And those are experiments, or if you want to simplify it, user stories. Okay? So, and I want to finish that. We actually have 5 minutes, I think. 4 minutes. Okay, so are you competing like any other product on a pharmacy shelf? It's actually everybody with different names, but effectively everybody providing the same thing. You know, we're all Scrum coaches, we're all Agile coaches, we're all in this company or the other company. We're all competing, maybe different names, but essentially we are providing to the eye of the customer the same exact thing. What I'm warning you is be careful, because sometime, someday, somebody come up with a different kind of idea of what needs to be on a pharmacy shelf. I may come with something like that in this case, right? Help, I have a headache. This is called purpose branding. So these guys actually create a product, and the product has essentially what the customer is looking for. I have a headache. The actual product, it's written down there, like at the bottom, right? It's very small. You actually have to really look at that. And essentially what they're doing is, the job is in mind. So, help, I have a headache. Help, I cut myself. There was another one. Help, I'm horny. What? I had to look. It's condoms. Okay, fair enough. Maybe that's help for a lot of things or whatever. I'm not saying do exactly what they do. In fact, the opposite. But the point being I'm making here is think about the job. The solutions evolve over time, and make that as a primary thing. See, the problem and the sad truth, I mean, Tom yesterday was going in different directions on it and trying to explain that, but I think we are actually losing the customer along the way. Where is the customer? I was trying to look at it. Okay, it's obviously a stakeholder if you look at it, but let's not come just with requirements. Let's come with the needs first. Those needs, by the way, when they become a backlog, they can absolutely, because they're permanent as well, they give a lot more clarity to the entire organization. If I ask two people in the same office, what do their customers' needs are, they would actually give you two different answers. But if they have this kind of backlog, there is clarity. Okay? And that's pretty much it. So disrupt or die. The final thought is the following. There is a world out there that needs to be changed. But it's a world that needs you to change. Thank you. Next is now. I don't know if we have time for no, we don't have time for questions. However, I'll be around all day, so please stop me anytime. My flight is tomorrow, so, okay? Thank you very much.